Hey, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mike Paladino, here with Stout Tanks and Kettles Brewing Equipment. We're going to be talking a little bit about some things that can help brewers as they continue to grow. I'll have a little bit of who I am. I have about almost 20 years in the brewing industry. 16 of those were putting a little paint on the joints in the back and learning the skills of a brewer like most. And did that mainly in the Northwest, based out of Portland, Oregon, Salem, Oregon, and worked around the industry in a little bit. What we'll what I'll bring today is a little bit of the pain and suffering that I experienced and some of the great, things and obstacles we overcame. Hopefully you guys can find it interesting and we can learn a little bit together. I'm joined here today by a friend and fellow brewer colleague, Don. Don, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for having me. It's been about well over a decade at least that I was brewing here in the Pacific Northwest, and got to get in at the ground floor at a brewery that was starting to hit its stride, and eventually finishing up my time there when they hit about 15,000 barrels. So I got to see a lot of growth over just a wonderful time in the beer industry, and now help people with the equipment side, and use a lot of the insight that I have there, a lot that my colleague Mike has taught me as well, and now have a chance to still be working with people and be a part of the industry that I love so much. So excited to talk about surviving and thriving. Just a a phased approach to growing your brewery. It's a lot of different concepts for how to take that next step, should you need to, with your brewery, sometimes even questioning whether or not you should need to. So let's dig in.
Yeah, excellent. All right, there we go. Sorry, down button. It all
All
starts,
right.
why we're here. I think a lot of us, it starts with why we're here. It's a lot of passion and desire. Some brewers tend to be people that are great and likable to be around. So why do we want to be brewing? Here's a couple of those things that kind of bring us in. But what brought me into brewing was a lot of it is the people itself. I really fell in love with the opportunity to hanging out, bartending in a brew pub. Found out that this was an industry that was something different, passionate, and fell in love. I'm sure Don, you probably had some similar experiences. I know you did a little more, different experience than I had, where I moved around and opened a bunch of different locations and had some experiences that way. But what brought you in?
I think it was the camaraderie as well, like you said. The just the brewers just come from all walks of life, but in the end, they share a passion for the craft, and we can geek out. And one of my old friends used to say, "How do you when you walk into a bar and you sit next to somebody, how can you tell if they're a brewer? It's because they're going to tell you." You know, they're they're pretty much very excited about the industry, very excited to hear people's thoughts on beer, and just uh, we enjoy the part mad scientist, part chef. It's funny that when I say a lot of people from the beer industry come from different backgrounds, amazingly enough, a lot of them have a fine arts background. I don't know why, it just happens that way, but it's kind of fun. We all probably start off like this gentleman here. I don't know about the collar and everything, but we have that look, we have that thought, and by the time we're done, you see us in some overalls with probably yeast all smeared across it and everything. But
Hmm.
we're having a blast. We're loving what we do. Definitely a job of passion.
Sure.
Cool swag. I don't necessarily know about it being cool swag as much as cool swag and say experiences. I think the experiences that you get to experience at the brewery, beyond just in the brewery itself, sometimes you get to do out of brewery things that are just kind of cool. Maybe your brewery is affiliated with the local science museum like we have here, where they do these brewery after dark nights, where you can be at those and meeting people. Sometimes there's outdoor events. Sometimes there's just these conferences that you get to go to,
It's the
and just
friendship, the
yeah, just get
relationships.
to enjoy the camaraderie of the group. But
Yeah.
free beer for life. Well, I mean, it's like working in a donut shop. You can only have so much after a while, but you get to not just enjoy your own beer, but you get to have a lot of other people's beer and a lot of different styles, and you get to enjoy those. Passion for the craft. Just reiterate that everybody that is in brewing is there for the beer. I mean, they just love beer, every aspect of it. It just makes us giddy.
Yeah.
And then for the chosen few, where you get to be your own boss, you get to put up the largest contribution and probably one of the largest investments in your life, but also you get to reap the benefits and really be one of those folks out there that is pioneering and in some cases and bringing beer to areas that maybe don't have it. I mean, granted, there are 9,000 breweries and growing, but there are still plenty of opportunities out there for neighborhood type environments where people still are looking for craft beer.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring them to them.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely more and more opportunity everywhere you look. Moving on to the next one here. We have, I know this is going to help me. There it is. It's funny. Where's my mouse? Business plans can vary. We're going to go over a few of these. Let's kind of chop it up so that we can digest it a little bit. But on-site sales. These are where a lot more of our brewers, I think, fit into this. A couple of the examples, if you want to lead us on that, Don.
Sure. On-site sales definitely rely upon the building so much. You're looking at a lot of times dedicating at least half of your building to customer facing. You want to have as many people in the seats. That's what's paying the bills. You want to have a comfortable environment. You start to get to what your draws are. Your draws going to be, are you going to be a music venue? Are you going to have a great brew pub that just happens to be on a heavily traveled route? Are you going to be having tractor pulls in your back of your brewery? I don't know what you're going to do, but I mean, it could be any number of things, and it's very specific to your group. These are the people that you want to be a part of what your brewery is all about. So having outside draws beyond just the beer is nice, because it at least brings the people in and allows them then to sample the beer, then to become adamant supporters of the beer. What is the cost of labor and equipment needed to dispense the product? Not incredibly high. I mean, you do have some bartending. There's even self-pour stations in states that allow them currently, where you can change that over. And I know a lot of people have gone this route in states that do allow it, because they can make that area much smaller. And then instead of putting a bartender there, maybe they have somebody who has intimate knowledge of the beer and can talk about the different styles and talk about everything with the customers, and they really tend to get jazzed about that. You also protect yourself a little bit more when it comes from the aspect of over serving. You never want someone's tips to be leading them to decide to over serve and put your brewery at jeopardy. So the self-pour technology has really come a long ways. Kind of monitors a certain amount of alcohol over a certain amount of time, so therefore it's a safe alternative. Food service, who's responsible? A lot of people don't want to be restaurateurs. They take advantage of either local corridors of neighborhood businesses that are nearby. Sometimes they'll bring in food trucks. Another lately popular thing is just pop-ups, where they have traveling chefs that come in and just do some fun stuff, so. And then the last one is matching the customer traffic and revenue to goals. We all get into this, at least when you're opening your own brewery, to be successful. So you want to make sure that the amount of seats that you have, the amount of traffic that you have, leads up to the end result, the amount of money that you need to have to stay in business and be surviving and thriving.
Yeah, the passion can definitely get the inspiration and the starting, but we always definitely have to make sure that we're being realistic and matching our business plan and our revenue goals to what we're capable of doing. So always good to keep that in mind, because the passion can be the creative driving force, but it's all about the Benjamins when it comes to keeping alive. So excellent. Let's get this over here. And the next one style is distribution plan. The style of on-site versus distribution, slightly different, but still some things to think about here. And Don, you can take over from here again.
Sure. Distribution. So you're relying heavily on packaging equipment. One thing that people just need to know is that it takes a lot of skill to operating packaging equipment. If you don't have a qualified packaging technician, or the ability to have somebody learn to be a qualified packaging technician, you could be taking perfectly good beer and throwing it down the toilet. It's just, it can easily be a spot where you oxidize your beer, promote just terrible off flavors. You could have very short shelf life, and you don't want that, because you have less control of your product the second it leaves your doors. Secondly, it's a packaging game. Your margins are so much smaller, because now you're throwing labor, you're throwing the cost of materials, you're throwing time, you're throwing a lower initial sell. And when you sell to a distributor, you have to account for their markup. So typically your product goes up probably about 30% to them, or after them, 30% to the grocery store. So by the time you're done, if you sell it too high, your on-shelf price is going to be too high, and you may not get the traction of sales that you want. So this really involves a little bit of business acumen, a lot of negotiating, and a lot of really trusting your distributor. Then you have to add some sales staff. You have to get the people out there pounding the pavement, talking, making the connections, and also QC staff. You have to have some quantitative way of showing how well your product's going to hold up over the course of time. Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 3 months? Is it going to be even longer than that? I don't know. I mean, ideally, most of the time, I would say anything beyond 3 months, you're starting to get to beer that is less than fresh, and your product is starting to deteriorate. We used to go and search stores and see, and if you found something that was old, it was, as the breweries grow, they do this, they do a buyback. It wasn't uncommon. If I saw something that was way out of spec, I would buy it, bring it to the brewery. We would dispose of it, just be reimbursed for that. That's an expense that is necessary, but it's hard for the startups to do. It's something that an established brewery definitely does. Knowing what you can do in your state, you're going to have self-distribution versus 3-tier. Certain states are very favorable. We can distribute, I think, up to 5,000 here in Oregon. I'm not certain if it's changed since the last time I looked, but self-distribution is a great way to go from the get-go if you have the desire to be in logistics. It's a pain in the neck sometimes, but if you get started this way and eventually you transfer to, say, a distributor, a lot of times they have to compensate you with that brand building that you've done up front. A lot of times based off of that year's worth of revenue, they will have to give a certain amount and almost a buyout. And I know a few breweries that have done this in order to establish a foothold into their next bit of equipment that they're getting into, their next expansion. Cold storage space, super important. The second is package. You want to be able to keep it cold. You don't want to try to schedule to have your distributor come and pick it up right then and there, because you know that it's not necessarily going to happen. You have to have the ability to keep it cold, regardless of whether or not they can show right up that day or whether or not it's going to be 2 days from. So very important things to have for a distribution model.
Yeah, I think that definitely the type of skill level can be different with the distribution. You start to get sometimes a little more specialized people that are looking at making relationships. Those distributions, like you said, are similar to marriages. They work for a lot of people, and some it's a tougher one to get out of if you do have to get out. Cold storage is always something as well that I've found that you never have enough of, no matter the size. When you're just, having distribution, it's always something where you're kind of thinking about, planning ahead, building up, using space high is what I'm always suggesting if that's possible. So, whoops. You still there, Don?
I'm still here. I think you just lost the slideshow somehow.
That's an interesting one. There we go.
we should be on common ground there.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, back to common ground.
Yeah, so
on this one, what do we find that are similar, that cross over? Because there is the crossover part, and you can go ahead and start there, Don.
Yeah. So you're going to assess the best way to sell your product to meet your goals. A lot of this relies upon the geographic area. Some places are going to be in need of that distribution model. I would say those are few and far between now. Much more people are doing smaller systems within 4 walls. But you could find yourself in a rural environment that does not have a brewery in quite some distance, where you can make some headways and be a distribution model very easily. Like I said, the more breweries that do open, those are a little bit further out. But with a solid business plan, anything is possible. So it's just a matter of doing your homework there and making sure you pick the right one for you. Phased plans. A lot of people come in and then they do the build out in phases. A recent customer of ours, I went and visited, where they have a facility right now, 5-barrel system, very large building that they're working with. They've opened up the bottom floor of that building as a first phase, and that 5-barrel system is more than adequate for handling that. But as they open up the second floor, they are going to find themselves in probably doubling their seat capacity or more, actually probably more. And they're going to need more beer production. Right now, they do a combination of their 5-barrel, and they have a few solid brands that they contract with. They own the lot next door to the building. Their plans are to push into that next lot, bring in a larger system, and take it to what they call their next phase, obviously. So this is common for those who really have thought things through. Now, not everybody's going to have this kind of foresight or this kind of city support, but if you have a phase plan, it's pretty easy to put that together and know when you've hit each section of your goal there. Organic growth, system size, half size, hot side. This is pretty common to have a half size hot side. Throwing labor at it in order to take it to the next level there, where you're doing half batches into a larger size cellar, and then when the time does come for that pressure relief, if you will, then you find yourself easily able to sell the hot side, get a single size hot side, maybe even bring on a couple double size tanks of that size. The reason that this works really nice is because the half size hot side also limits your initial footprint. It also and lowers the amount of utilities that you need. And that is something that sometimes is a little bit of a holdup for people. Maybe they can bring in more utilities as the business makes money. But not all buildings are just set up right out the gate to be perfect for how you want them in the long run. So,
yeah, the growth can be definitely over time, where you're exactly able to bring that money in, pay some of that down. Now you're able to bring that 3-phase into the building. You're able to bring the bigger gas line into the building. So I think a lot of times, asking another brewer how they grew is really beneficial for people who, instead of just thinking this is the way it's going to be, ask your fellow brewers how they've grown. You'd be surprised what they've done. All right. The tough part, how do you make this happen? What are the things that we need? And not all of us have Daddy Warbucks or behind our back, but the funding sources. There's quite a few of them. Hit on a few of these but this is something that brewers do have to face. Don?
Yeah. During COVID, I would say a lot of banks stopped investing in breweries. they saw a lot of restaurants go down and immediately just associate breweries with restaurants. So a lot of the funding was private funding during COVID. Those were the investors that had money, weren't seeing much on the returns, wanted to get into a business that really it is proven to be recession proof, pandemic resistant. Uh, People still buy beer regardless. It's a guilty pleasure. It's something that is fortunate for us. It's a very safe bet. Um, Convincing banks that sometimes is not easy, but angel investors, people who have money, a lot of times an angel investor is just somebody within the family, but I'm just kind of using that term overall for investors. People with large amount of cash that are looking to put it into an investment for the long term. So bank loans, SBA loans, those are still there. There are a lot more hoops to jump through, but more than capable of being approached. SBA loans, I had a customer who had his loan denied, then had to have another evaluation of the building done, then came back to me, and then out of the blue a year later says, "Hey, by the way, my SBA loan just got approved." And so for those who really are perseverant and like who continue to be tenacious at this, they can make it happen. It's not an easy road. Um, One of our customers that I was out at talked to me about how the city gave him some beneficial pricing on the building because it was in a corridor that they wanted to bring some livelihood to. And amazingly enough, the second that he signed papers, started doing work on that building, all the other businesses started to be purchased. And this was an older area that just didn't have much growth. Um, People realize that breweries are anchors to traffic, and that they are anchors in the community, and that when there is a brewery there, if you have another business, it's probably going to gain the benefit of that brewery being there. So lastly is lease to own. A lot of that is happening right now just because banks have been um, a little bit more difficult to get approvals from. Banks have also been jacking up rates left and right in order to combat inflation. And so borrowing that money is a little bit harder. Now, that to say, the lease to own is a little bit of a different situation. It's more like a mortgage for the equipment that you then pay off over the course of, say, 5 years, and then have that $1 buyout at the end. A lot of people are doing this. It's mainly for the equipment. You still have to have money to get started with the building build out, other things that are involved in the business, but this is a nice way to go for the system itself.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would say for anyone that's ever come to me prior to my time here at Stout or whatnot, I said start early. If you're need to know where you need to be, if you think you want to open a brewery in 2 years, don't wait 2 years to find out where you sit financially. Start to kind of ask the questions. Go talk to some type of advisor. So a lot of the bankers themselves, the people who are doing the equipment leasing, will help guide you. They want to make sure you have an idea of where you need to sit when it comes to the time, and not just be surprised when you go to ask for a loan or see where you stand. Doors are now open. We've got the funding. We've got everything. You're moving along. What do? You usually need to think about a few things, is how things are moving now that the doors are opening. A lot of times we're running through the forest. You don't see the trees. You kind of have to sometimes slow down. Sometimes it's asking for help and asking for other opinions. Don, I'll let you go from here.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. So it all started with a business plan. When you look at that business plan, it's going to evolve over time, but it's still important to have it written down, have it there to be able to reference. When you start to evaluate how you're doing, pull out the business plan. Have you met the goals that you are looking to achieve there? If you've surpassed them, how can you improve it and move on to the next level? It's probably the most important thing to be able to look at your business plan and know how you've done, because anything else is just a hunch. So important to get an outside perspective. You could think one thing but sometimes having an unbiased opinion or someone outside of your business that can take a look in and just see how you're doing, can evaluate it in a very non-emotional way, is going to be an outstanding thing for you to do. And that can be from any aspect. It could be from the business aspect. It could be from the customer experience. I mean, we have certain businesses that come in and check and see how you're doing with the customer experiences. You have any aspect of how you're doing as far as production wise. You know, what is the quality of the not even just the experience, but the quality of the product. These are all things to get an outside perspective on. They are huge. On that last one, you know, down to I believe it's White Labs does a QC day. You know, take advantage of that special pricing for something that they do, where they can take and they can actually do some sort of testing. And I'm sure there's other places that do it as well, but I know it's probably more common. That's the one that just came to mind because I've used it in the past. But the important thing is to have solid data, and that's the thing that sometimes as a owner or as the person running the business you can't bring, because you bring a concept of like an emotional involvement almost with the business. When you first put your business plan together, you had to put together some sort of a profit and loss. How is it lining up? Are you exceeding the amount of profit that you thought you were? Is it matching up with your expenses? Maybe your expenses have changed. Maybe your rent has gone up. I mean, it could be any number of things that are involved in there. So really taking that and analyzing it to a key. Volume. It's not just about volume, but volume does kind of show a lot. It's one of those things that I know a lot of brewers look at. They look to see how they compare with others in their state. There are lots of areas where this information is published, where you can look up and see barrel age per year and how you're competing with your peers, and that is another way to kind of gauge your success, because if people didn't like your product, I don't think you could move it. So volume does work out as being a pretty good gauge. So
Yeah,
Mike, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it is being humble enough not only to have, you know, as a brewer, you need to be humble enough to have somebody taste your beer that's skilled and qualified, or a team, and tell you an honest opinion. You know, you also need that same type of stuff for your business plan. So asking other brewers, using stuff like your brewers guilds, your brewers associations, stuff like that. Those are the resources you can find out where you're weighing yourself when it comes to certain volumes, when it comes to production, and then you can see the truth in somebody's eyes when they look at you and you say, hey, listen, tell me the truth about my beer. That's going to make you successful or not if you're able to be humble enough to do that. So, types of the expansion.
We missed one, Mike.
Did we? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
When do I pursue the expansion? That's a question. Usually, I think the answer is 2 years ago is when the pinch points are always there for the brewers. When do you want your new tanks? You wanted them last year. Financially, you're usually looking for something to make sure, does that make financial sense though? And this is why we're going to talk about, is this the right time? Don?
Yeah. Important to the concept of expansion is, have you paid off your existing debt? It's hard to get out of a hole when you keep digging. So try to see if at least a solid portion of that debt has been paid back. In addition, if you haven't paid back much of that debt, a lot of people will not lend you any more money. So having a solid payback that shows that you are in fact creditworthy for more money is huge. So probably not a good idea to look into expansion if you haven't paid any of your debt back. But first gauge to think is probably the first thing to check. Secondly, opportunities are on a timeline. As a business person, you may have your finger on the pulse of maybe a new area of your town that is getting a lot of investment from the city or something like that. Maybe there are opportunities that you kind of have to jump at a little bit earlier than you would like. These are, there is a gamble, but I know a lot of people that have taken that gamble and succeeded. You just have to be able to weigh that and maybe even get a business person's acumen on it if they have a chance. If you're not feeling that you have enough to make a good decision on it, maybe sometimes bringing in an outside consultant for that is always good, because those are high reward but high risk. So you have to be willing to know what you're getting involved in. Sometimes you be limited by state regulations. That comes down and ties into the know your licensing. In certain states with certain licenses, you can self-distribute to a certain amount of locations. Once you've exceeded that, you have to change your licensing or modify it or get extra licensing. And the one thing that you never want to do is find yourself in that gray area and really just not knowing, am I following the law or not? Because that's something you never do when it comes to alcohol, because the government will not just slap you. It'll be like they'll punch you. They will just, you will find yourself reeling from the effects of trying to navigate the gray area with the government when it comes to alcohol. They don't fool around. So know your state regulations. If you're going outside of the state, know both states' regulations along with the federal regulations as well. So,
or international if you're going that big, right?
Exactly.
The types of expansion, there's a few different ways to expand, not just one. We'll kind of chop these up again so people can kind of think about those in a little bit more of a different, structure. The production facility is where we'll start here. Don's worked in this mixture of a production facility, so got a lot of experience here, Don.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. A production facility is typically more industrial. The lower price per square foot is key, because at this point, you're not getting the same margin that you get off of a brew pub model. You're getting, the price for selling a keg to a distributor versus the price of selling it in-house is going to be, you're going to make 6 to 7 times much more money off of an in-house sale of a keg than you will outside. That transfers to the same thing. Maybe not the same kind of margin because it's not a per draft sale, but cans themselves, they're going to have discounted rates when they go to distributors. It's just the way it's given, so that on shelf price actually matches something that is reasonable. So you're going to make less, but it's all about the volume. You need a larger space overall to store raw materials, a larger space overall for your cold storage. You're going to have a need for much larger utilities in order to, you're going to have larger chillers, you're going to have larger tanks, you're going to have larger electrical needs, probably large air compressor to run pneumatics. You're going to have a lot of different things that are needed. And then probably one of the more important things that people don't think about is semi-truck access at docks. I've seen this many times, and the breweries, maybe has everything that you need, but then they're driving, 300 feet with a pallet of cans in order to get to the back of the truck that can't back up to where their dock is. That's pretty much a recipe for disaster, especially if you have a lot of potholes in your pavement over there. So that's an easy way to have some damaged product over the course of time. You want to limit that. It's not very efficient. It's a waste of time. It could take you like 3 times as long to load up a truck. These are things to consider. So,
yeah, definitely. I think the little bit of the other things I picked out. Skilled staff. You tend to have people that have a little bit more skills in working those forklifts. Working pallet jacks, you're working wrappers if you have something that's going to be spinning and, wrapping your pallets, and then maintaining some of those things. There's a little bit different, you're maintaining the equipment, a little bit larger equipment, different equipment, air compressors, and maybe other things that you're, not used to. So these are the type of things you have to think about as a skilled labor, along with the expansion of the facility itself, is the people that are going to help you get there to the end goals that you're searching for. So you may need to be doing some more hiring.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part as well that I didn't even hit, Mike. Thank you for that. That large production facilities, I mean, when they get very large, having like an on-site engineer to fix stuff.
Yes.
That's just part of the process. But when you're a smaller production facility, you have to be that engineer. You have to know how to tear apart pumps, put them back together. You have to know how to do very basic electrical wiring. You need to know how to do so many different things in order to keep that facility up and running. And one of the main things I stress is just have a rock star of a packaging technician, because it is probably one of the most crucial parts of this. Everything could be 100% perfect, and if you have lousy packaging, your product not only doesn't satisfy the needs of your customer, it doesn't accurately represent your brand, but it is a great way to just waste money.
All right. Yeah. Let's this skill, gotta have it. So satellite brewery, a couple different versions, so you can have different atmospheres for people on the satellites that can be a little bit different from your main starting point, and that's exciting for, I think, both ownership, employees, and the customer. It really gives like a little bit different kind of like atmosphere for the different locations, and they get to have the excitement about how each one is unique. This is a very successful one here. Our friend Darren Welch over at Pelican has a very, very successful satellite thing going on, Don.
Yeah, and this is a good example. Like I said, we're fortunate that we know Darren. He was happy to give us some samples here, some pictures. We're talking about, in his business, he has a very large production facility, but it all started with the one on the left, though, the original pub that is from 1996. So, this has been around for a long time, and it wasn't until I don't know when the second location happened, but I do know that it was quite some time before that second location came into play. And now he's opening just a brand new location in Siletz Bay, but he's found an environment where he's now up and down the coast quite a bit in the Oregon area. So just a very good market that he found that he could serve, and that he has great brand recognition. And that's the huge part. It's name recognition. These people are proud of this brewery. They're proud of the brand and what it brings to it. He's setting up these locations far enough from the original that he's getting a new customer base. That's huge. Smaller brewing systems, well, I mean, they're not really that small for him, but they are smaller than the production facility. It's not uncommon to see, in his case, maybe a 15-barrel system or so in one of these locations, or to meet the demands that he's having. Now, everybody's system is going to be different, obviously, but the reason that you want to keep it down to these smaller setups is to have less need for large utilities. Compared to this production facility, I'm sure the electric bill is quite a bit different. The water bill is quite a bit different. But also his location is limiting. If you look at it, he's on the beach. What does that mean when you're right on the beach? Like, now you may have limits with the amount of effluent that you can send, how you can send it. Is it tied into city utilities or not? I know that original location, they had to figure a way out of getting the effluent out, because they can't just obviously dump it into the ocean. It's definitely an important thing to bring about. You have to make sure that you take all those things into consideration, and I'm glad that he does. He takes these things into consideration in all of, especially the newer locations. You take what you learned from your original locations and you move it on, and each one is an improvement on the original. That's a huge part of it. Never repeat any sort of thing that you can improve upon. You want to make it better every single time. Let's see here. We have modest utilities, as I said, and then look at the licensing. Once again, very important. But the nice part about locations and satellite locations is, if you have canned product or bottled product, growlers to go, you have a great ability to get offsite sales in addition. So even if a person is not coming to have a meal at your location or whatnot, they're going to come in and they're going to get a view of the location. And a lot of times it's that view that makes them say, "Hey, I'm coming here next time. Next time I'm in the neighborhood, I'm popping in here," and that's a huge important part of this is that um, you're going to get people's eyes. You may not get their patronage in the way of a sit down meal that time, but you're going to get their eyes, and that's a huge part right off the bat. So
Yeah, no, another thing that's interesting is when you have the satellites, you can, depending on the licensing and laws, if out here we're allowed to, you can make your portfolio a little bit bigger, where you can shuffle around and have these smaller satellites that are able to give you the bigger production facilities, the bigger tap list that they're looking for, this rotating tap list, because it's harder for the larger facility to maybe brew something that's moving fresh all the time and changing out and exciting with marshmallows or peanut butter or any of those things. But maybe you take this stuff on the smaller utility and send those over to the ones that have the larger facility. So gives you a little bit more. The craft beer drinker is always looking for that selection and variety. So adds to variety as well. So the R&D facility. This is one I think the fun house tends to be. The brewers that work in the R&D, we're usually a little bit envious if you're not in the R&D of the ones who are. They get to play around with interesting ingredients and whatnot, and keeps the brewer as well excited. When you have an owner who's in a large facility, how do you keep your staff maybe going? I don't know, R&D facility can help that out. Don, you want to expand some more?
thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think that the tie-in at the end of the last slide coming into this, you're totally right. It was almost a crossover, really, where you're saying now we have some smaller batches, a little more exciting. You can do that in some of these other facilities as well, but this R&D facility is just very specific. It doesn't even necessarily have to be another facility. I know people that have just a vigorous program of R&D inside their own brewery. They just have dedicated space for it, dedicated fermenters, dedicated whatnot. But even the big guys, they have a need to follow R&D tightly, because you have to keep the customer excited and engaged. So more fun batches, getting all those different beer styles that you probably wouldn't do because the cost of goods is really high, and just having fun. Also highlighting your talented brewers. They become personalities that people do follow. So we're going to try and move it along a little bit here. Sorry if we start moving a little faster. I think we have a lot to say about each of these slides, but we're going to get it moving here.
Yeah, I know. I think just making sure that the people are also looking at R&D as something that is relevant. Don't think that it's too expensive. It needs to be done. Honestly, no matter the size, whether it's a 5 gallons, whether it's 5 barrels or 50 barrels, the R&D facility will be unique to each person depending on what their facility can add or what their budget can really accept. So, but it is relevancy. Is what we all know in the market. Another, types of expansion, contract brewing. This is one that, can be a great way to kind of get more volume without necessarily, having a facility. Don?
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. This is, some people start off just contract brewing. They build the brand, then they move to their next step. That's kind of hard. You got to have a product that just has a lot of pull on it that you've built up over the course of time. You have to have a lot of trust in the facility that you're using, that everything is going to be replicated in the same way every single time. I've also seen this on the other hand, where you have breweries that have opened that just have such a demand for certain beers that they're just not capable of doing it on their system. So I know of at least a handful of examples where they've gone out, they've taken maybe their flagship IPA or something that happens to be very, very in desire, and then sent it out to contract brewing. so that they could, maybe they still make a batch or two in house, but for the most part, it's taking the pressure. It's their pressure relief valve for their growth. Allows them to like kind of breathe, think about their next steps. But once again, it's all upon trusting the contract brewer that you're using. Sometimes it's going to be just a dedicated contract brewing facility. Other times you maybe find that there's another brewery on the other side of town that has some capacity, and that's happened a lot lately, where a lot of breweries want to keep that volume going, keep their employees going, but for some reason, a pandemic or any sort of thing that came in the way opened up opportunities for people to use contract facilities to get their beer out. So.
There's different levels of that contract brewing as well. Like you said, I'm glad you mentioned that. Some think you have to go to a very, very large place like Anheuser-Busch or something to get somebody to contract for you, where you could find a 10 or a 15 barrel brewery that does have some extra capacity, an extra tank that maybe they can pull aside for you and get you the type of volume you're needing to get to that next level.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would say in addition to that is just make sure that you have all of the legalese figured out so that
exactly
everything is protected. So, that's an important thing that a lot of people overlook is a lawyer. And if you don't know a good one, make sure you have one, because you want to make sure that everything's spelled out, protection of your intellectual brand, along with easy ways to terminate the agreement if you find that it's just not working.
The tap room expansion, brew pub, these tend to be really common, a little bit easier for some to get right into, depending on finding an old house or finding a very unique location. It can be something a little bit unique and different from your original location to give some more style, flair, or complete different atmosphere. Don?
Yeah, I think that this is the most common that we see these days. The brew pub is where a lot of people get their initial teeth sunk into the industry. You can do very well if you have a great business plan. Make sure that people are, everyone in there understands what they're getting into, how they're going to be compensated, what kind of beer you need to sell in order to be successful. But you are gaining the margins when you sell over your own bar. You're gaining a massive amount more than you would if you were to sell that same beer via distribution method. You're gaining the per pint price. In certain states, you have the self-distribution that you can do. A lot of times that's pretty liberal. Sometimes it's a good amount of self-distribution you can do. So if you do have that extra product, you can get it in the cans or bottles and get it out. You're pairing with food that brings people in and that is allowing them to legally and safely drink a certain amount of beer. And you're also in a situation where it's about the environment. You're bringing in a draw with some sort of a unique location or draw. I mean, one of our customers I showed up there is a little house. It's literally a little house. It's very, very unique setup. On the interior, they have a lot of stackable tanks down in a lower area. The brewery is down. You can kind of see into it, which is really nice. A lot of people love that. Each spot has their own individual draw, and maybe it's great food. And I mean, I'm looking at those sandwiches, those sliders. It looks pretty good to me over there. So, I mean, it's a matter of, matching that together. And then in some cases, you don't even necessarily, a lot of people don't want to be restaurateurs. They just have a tap room. Maybe just even having a tap room with small snacks or something off-site, and you have the ability to self-distribute. Now you've taken your seats that you have in-house and you've expanded them. And once again, the more seats you have, the more profitable you're going to be.
Yeah, the uniqueness and whatnot of a tap room or brew pub is usually something that can give people a completely different feel. And I've always liked the variety when you can see something on the expansion of the tap room and brew pub. So what works and what doesn't work? We have headaches, we have scars, we have bumps and bruises, so we try to learn from them. Otherwise it's insanity, right?
Yep.
So what are some of the things that are working, and some of the things that we don't work, that hasn't worked? Don?
I think the first and foremost is a solid business plan. We're far from the days where you can just jump in and kind of fake it till you make it. You got to have a really good business plan. You got to know how everyone is being compensated. I've had situations where I have one person. Sometimes I have two people that are partners, and one's like the business guy and one's the brewer. Those usually work pretty well, anything in that aspect. Typically, when you start exceeding that and you say, I'm going to have, 5, 6 partners, all of a sudden now everybody thinks they're going to quit their day job and that they're going to just be, supported by this brewery model. And that's just not necessarily the way it works. Can a brewery support a certain amount of workers? Yes, but it just needs to be spelled out. Like, what are the compensations, and that's an important thing to make up front, because if it's not written down, everybody has this assumption in their head as to what that means. Can cause a lot of headaches down the road. I think timelines are important. Timelines, getting those discussions with financial institutions at the early onset, maybe not necessarily even having to fill out the paperwork yet, but just sometimes even a discussion. We utilize certain partners that I send them off to, and sometimes even with a quick discussion, they could say, well, I think that you're going to be a good candidate, but I think you should do this, 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 and this first, and then come back to me and fill out the paperwork. Because a lot of times it's proper planning is always been instilled, that you have to properly plan. You have to make sure that you're going to be in your best to make this work. I don't know, Mike, do you have any others that you want?
I said I couldn't agree with you more. It's the, being, I think, realistic, planning, these ahead, asking for some help. What doesn't work, being on an island, brewers that don't have other people drink their beer and tell them honest, opinions, that doesn't work. You need to have people give you an honest opinion, not just about your product, give you an honest opinion about what the customer's view is. Give you an honest opinion on what your employees' views are. So, being open and listening, adjusting, being willing to adjust, being willing to say, this didn't work. This beer isn't good. Let's dump this beer. You do the same thing with a business plan. If it's not working, you got to move on. You can't be stuck there just banging your head against it thinking it's going to work. So,
and that rolls into one other thing that always happens. And oh no, it's okay. One other thing that always happens is that sometimes as brewers, we want to just brew what we want.
Sure.
And you always have to make sure you're brewing what the customer wants, because they're the ones paying. Yeah. And I know what I drink and I know what other people drink, but do I know what my customers drink and what are they going to be paying? So a lot of times it's factual data. What is selling, what isn't selling? Make sure that you're tying your production to that, because you don't necessarily want to be brewing a lot of beers that have no demand, or maybe you just adjust the sizes of them or the frequency of them.
Sure.
This is all production management that needs to be done in order to be successful.
Yep. It's asking somebody else what they think. Exactly. Questions. Let's see. What do we have? Some of the common questions that I find is, the financing question. I find out what people ask a lot of is, how much does it cost to open a brewery? That's just a very, very odd, open question. Or, what does it cost to expand my brewery? A lot of times it's going back to, like, what do you want to identify yourself as? Getting back to, do you want to be a brewery tap room? Do you want to be more of a production type facility? Or is this what is your identity? So I think that is one of the most common things that I see is that right there, is they're not thinking about identity first. Once you have that identity, I think a lot of those other things can fall into plan. Don, what are the other, questions you think that people ask you a lot when they're looking at either expanding there?
Yeah, I think in the onset or in expanding, just figuring out production volumes. I think that's part of what we do that is huge. You know, after a conversation with Mike or I, we can kind of give you an honest assessment of where you should fall in. We can give you a good idea of where that system should be, because a lot of times there's just this thought, and this commonly happens. I need a 15 barrel system. Why do you need a 15 barrel system? You know, we have to like really go through the numbers. And because if you're just totally dedicated that you have to have a 15 barrel system, that's fine. You're going to do what you want to do. But, and you need somebody to bounce that off of, why do I need a 15 barrel system? How can I go about doing it? How can I start off here and end up here successfully? Because that 15 barrel system, you could eventually grow into it, but it's quite possible that maybe you'll never meet your capacity with that particular business model. This is important reasoning to like talk through with someone who knows what they're doing. You know, the professionals who are have been through it and have done it and have seen what has worked and what hasn't. These are important things to consider. But I think that's probably one of the biggest things, is make sure you're not wasting your money. Make sure that your money is well spent, especially when you're startup, especially when you're taking the leap from startup. Now you've had a little bit of maturity of your business. Now you want to go to the next step. That next step is just as important as when you first started off. Consider yourself a startup again, you know, and I think that's the important thing to make sure that you're doing, is that you're being wise with your money, wise with your time, and having all of those expectations kind of spelled out beforehand.
I think one of the other things that I think that people need to ask themselves is, how much are they willing to work and do things themselves? That becomes something where you're stretching yourself too thin a lot of times if you think you're going to be able to do everything. Be realistic about that. Get a good team around you. Be willing to, you know, pay them a decent amount of money where you're not just spending your time rehiring people. That can be a really, you know, bummer when you're spending your entire time, you know, rehiring people. How can you plan for expansion while designing your initial brew house? Those are some things where when you're talking with your builder, you know, you can hopefully talk to them about the facility that you're looking at, you're potentially, and they can hopefully guide you that way. There's a lot of planning, you know, when we're talking with people, and, you know, the more information that they can give us, the better we can really guide them. I think we're running down to the last 20 seconds here. So I'd like to just say thanks a lot, everyone, for listening. If you want to reach us, you can reach out to Don and I at stouttanks.com. We answer the phone, check our website, and really appreciate the time that you're allowed us to spend with you. And we'll hopefully see you at the next brew gathering.
And I want to thank CBP for having us. And once again, it's always a pleasure, and look forward to talking to you all in the future. Take care.
Cheers.